participants.
Wow.
So first I'm gonna just say a little bit about some upcoming events that are available to attend from Massachusetts Peace Action. So this webinar is part of the Anti-Racism and Peace webinar series that will be going on over the next couple weeks and months. So I'm just going to say a little bit about that. Events of the past few months have exposed deep racist inequalities with life and death consequences. COVID-19's disproportionate death tolls in communities of color and the continued blatant police and extrajudicial killings of Black people reached a tipping point with the murder of George Floyd on May 25th. We who have been active in the peace movement must be allies and accomplices in supporting Black, Brown, and Indigenous lives and the movements these communities are leading now. The injustices of racist policies, practices, and laws are interconnected with the militarism and destructive force against other nations wrought by our government with corporate complicity using our tax dollars. Massachusetts Peace Action will be hosting a series of webinars entitled Anti-Racism and Peace to explore the intersections between peace and racial justice. The series will feature local, national, and international activists, scholars, and lawmakers who will take on these issues, each with their own lens. So right now in the chat box, I'm gonna put a link to a list of all the upcoming events. The next one is on Thursday, July 30th. And yeah, you can learn more and sign up for all the upcoming events. This particular event is called Race Relations in Revolutionary Cuba, A Personal Story. What happened to George Floyd simply does not happen in Cuba. Why? What has been done in Cuba to uproot racism in the face of tremendous challenges, including more than 5 decades of aggressive policies by the US, including war, terrorism, and blockade? Is there no racism in Cuba today? In addition to growing up in revolutionary Cuba, Dr. Gloria Caballero, Gloria, I'm so sorry, has researched the formation of racialized nations, the power of storytelling, and Afro-Cuban contemporary visual art. In this webinar, she will address these issues from personal and academic perspectives. This event is co-sponsored by the Latin America Solidarity Coalition of Western Mass and the Trap Rock Center for Peace and Justice. So it is my great honor to introduce Gloria.
Thank you so much. First, I want to thank all the organizations that sponsor and that consider that that was going to be, or that should be a good moment in time in the history of every one of us to just hear another voice on what's going on about race in general. My full name is Gloria Alicia Caballero Roca. I was named after my 2 grandmothers. My mom's mother's name was Gloria, and my father's name, my father's name Alicia. Surname. Why isn't there a George Floyd in Cuba? Well, Paul Gilroy talks about the Black Atlantic. Some criticism because it's been based on the experience of the enslaved people in the North Atlantic. I agree with that because for all the enslaved people. So there's a Caribbean experience, there's a Central American experience, there's a North-South American, centuries, the rest of the South American experience.
The sound is having some interruptions.
Sorry?
The sound is having some interruptions. I just wanted to make you aware, do your best.
Okay. Yes, so what happens is that the experience that Black people had from all of that on the largest island of the Caribbean took a different nuance. You know, we not only have the English imperialism, we have the Spanish, we have the Dutch, we have the Portuguese. And with stripped completely of a culture of enslaved people. Now, I'm not going to paint a rosy picture about, you know, what happened with the Spanish and Portuguese colonies.
I'm so sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but it's really hard to hear, unfortunately. Like,
So let me know, is this better? Because I will make sure that. So what happens is that better?
Right now, yes.
yeah.
Okay, so we have to get closer. My apologies. So when you have these intersectionalities of the way we look at the world, or the way that we analyze what surrounds us, for the people enslaved in the Spanish colonies, people who came from the Yoruba western part of Africa, what's now called Nigeria, because that wasn't the case. So at least they have a vent. They could sing and they could praise those Catholic saints, and they would appropriate that and say, okay, I'm going to sing to some Saint Barbara, but in their tradition that is Chango. I'm going to sing to Regla, the Virgen de Regla, that's Yemaya. At least
No, Gloria, we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
No.
In the worst case, you might have to shut off your video to save your bandwidth for audio. That's one possibility.
Is it possible also just moving the location? Can you move your computer to another part that might pick up better? I mean, that might work.
Is that better?
Well, we don't know yet.
It goes in and out.
It's in and out.
We get a complete sentence, and then the next sentence is garbled.
Oh.
Can I speak to that? I think sometimes it goes for longer than a sentence and it's very clear, but then it sounds very staticky, and sometimes we can see your lips moving but no sound.
It gets late.
Yeah.
How about now?
Well, we'll see. Give it a test.
Okay, I'll give it a test. So I was saying, we know that there's a difference, you know, cultural difference when Spanish come with Catholic, the Catholic view of the world. They bring things appropriate relate to what we call today Santeria. And that's a venue through which you can do. Can you hear?
Yes, but right now we can, but you were bad. It went bad for a part in the middle.
How about now?
So far.
Okay, so let me know. I'm gonna be walking and trying to find the best spot. So as I was saying, why is there a Floyd? So perhaps this is a risky theory. Can you hear?
So far, yes, keep going.
Okay.
I'll let you know when.
Okay.
Stop where you are if you can.
Okay.
Just to see if it works.
It's a risky theory. Can you hear?
Yes.
Where when you intersect all those rituals, all the drummings, all that culture that still survives in Cuba, but not only the lines of people who are Blacks or Afro descendants, but also white people. That's what it boils down to, a culture that not only is a product of conquer and so it was able to put a lot of people in terms
No, Gloria,
of,
it's not good.
Yeah?
It's not good. It's not good.
I think you should shut off your video.
Let me know.
Excuse me, if everyone
Yes.
shuts off if everyone goes on mute, you'll be able to hear her better.
Yes.
And other people can shut off their video too. That may help also.
Yeah.
Gloria, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Can you
great.
hear me?
Now we can hear you. We'll
Okay.
let you know. We'll let you know if everything works.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. So I was just, trying to figure out or come to this theory that people sometimes talk about in terms of, okay, yes, there is racism in Cuba, but it's not clear cut. It's not black and white, because a woman can say, my daughter will never marry a black man, yet she being white, a cultural practice could be Santeria, and her mentor, she being a devotee of this religion. It's a cultural Cuban tradition that has this mixture of Catholicism and West African practice. She would be a devotee. Her mentor could be a black man or a black woman. So it's kind of, it's hard to say that there is not in many cases to a cultural practice that intersects African tradition, in Cuba. I was born in the eastern part of Cuba. I have 3 siblings. I'm the third one. My mom was a single parent. We moved from Santiago to Havana. In Marianao. And after a year, we were given a room at a hotel, and I lived there for 26 years. That room became the house, the apartment, the playing ground. We divided that room, what we call barbacoa. So it's like a mezzanine. It's you put upstairs the bedroom, the beds, and downstairs what you have is living room, a couple of furniture, and then a balcony overlooking Montserrat, La Calle Montserrat Street. Yes, the revolution marked a turning point in the lives of enslaved people. I would like to go back and say Cuba was being the largest island. Cuba inherited after the Haitian Revolution in 1804, Haiti being the producer of sugarcane after their liberation. So Cuba inherits this market. Cuba needs manpower to not only cut sugar, but also do all its byproducts. So where do we get that manpower if not from Africa? So there goes, and people talk about 700,000 enslaved men and women and children over the last, throughout the 19th century. That sugar production and the liberation of Haiti was part of what Cuba is. It builds on, first of the fear of the Black man after the Haitian Revolution. They never imagined that there would be enslaved people that were able to free themselves from French colonialism. Then Cuba starts a huge war of propaganda against everything that was Black, dark. So you have this, and in the middle of that massive sugarcane production, you not only have the formation of a colonial consciousness, because there is a new class that is ruling the economies. It's called in Spanish sacarocracia. It's a Spanish people, Cuban descendants of Spanish who became bourgeois through the production of sugarcane. So that class, strong economic and political power class is ruling Cuba throughout the entire 19th century. But then they say, hey, I want my share. I don't want to share this. Then because some of those people decided to liberate their enslaved men and women, made them part of their liberation army, and that the largest,
Claudia,
large wars of
unfortunately,
independence.
we're losing you again here and there. But maybe if you wanted to call into the meeting, maybe we could email you the number and try that way.
Let's see.
Cole, can you email Gloria the phone number?
Yes, I will do it. 1 second.
But I can hear you pretty well.
It was much better after the video was turned off, but still not perfect sometimes.
It's not perfect. Yeah. I'm gonna keep talking just until I get the email. Did you send it?
No, I'm trying to, yeah. If you go back to the thing where you registered, it would be in there, but I will send it to you another way.
Okay. Oh. Peace revolutionary anti-racism.
Yeah.
Puede cancelar.
I'm on the phone right now. My name is Margot. I can give you a phone number because I'm on through the phone. Want me to throw out a number? Okay, you ready? 312-626-6799. And when you're ready, I'll give you the meeting ID. You almost have to go back because we've missed some key parts, and it's fascinating listening to you. I'm very interested. My partner's from Haiti, and you know, what you're tying in is just so many stories that he's told me.
Okay, just a second.
Yeah, but the phone, yeah, I think that it's gonna be better if you do it by the phone.
No. So what's the number again, please, if you don't mind? I got
312 312 626 67 6799. And when you're ready, I have a meeting ID number.
Okay, I'm gonna call. Yes, the meeting ID.
840
840
5135
5135
7532.
7532.
And you're so wonderful at maintaining your composure with these technical problems. I am very impressed.
Well,
thank you for doing that for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to follow by pound. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Okay. Recording. Am I here? No. Can you hear me? Hello?
I'm wondering if you need to I can hear you really good now.
I can hear.
Okay. Okay, wonderful.
Yay!
Yay.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. All digits crossed.
What's that?
You may need to cancel your Zoom session on your computer.
What's going on? Hello?
Gloria, now we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, wonderful.
No, did you shut off your Zoom? Did you shut off the Zoom?
I'm on the phone.
But shut down the Zoom on the computer.
Okay.
Gloria,
Yeah.
have you turned?
Yes.
Gloria,
Okay.
have
Now
you
we hear you.
Yes.
her
Go
off?
ahead. Now we hear you. Go on.
Good?
Yes, very good. Get
Try
going.
it.
Gloria.
Okay.
Try it now.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So I was saying, can you listen now?
Yes, very well.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, you guys, for the patience and these things. Well, it's what it is. I was saying that, well, after the Haitian Revolution in 1804, what happened is that Cuba inherits all that sugarcane production that was done by the Haitians. So all this required a huge, amount of manpower. Where do they get this, arms and from to get that industry going? So they enslaved, and then Cuba arrived, and over 700,000 enslaved people from Africa. So it's men, women, and children. And there starts a large propaganda on the part of the sacarocracia. This is the sugar, the bourgeois people, descendants of Spaniards, who made large amounts of money through sugar production. So we have that, and that propaganda consisted of just making the black man be a savage man, a rapist, a man out of proportion, out of control, and that people are instilling fear to the rest of the population. So we have what they call el miedo al negro, fear to the black man, and that fear was instilled in the population, for many decades. And you see through caricatures, in literature, in the visual arts, and that fear was passed on from generation to generation. Meanwhile, we have in 1868 Carlos Manuel de Céspedes, who decides, okay, so I'm part of this bourgeoisie, I have these enslaved people, but I need to rebel against the colony. I don't want to give them my share, of what economically Cuba was producing. So that's what starts the wars of independence. I have to say that the Cubans, that the enslaved people who went to Cuba, who were brought to Cuba, they fought for their liberation, for their freedom from the moment they were forced into those large, huge ships in Africa. This is to say that no, they were not people who were just caught and that they came. No, they started their movements of liberation right from the beginning. They practiced mass suicide. They practiced their rituals. They got together, even when they put them together and did not speak the same language. No one wants to be enslaved or branded in parts of their body with high iron with the name of your owner, or of people who consider you just a cattle or shadow and a piece of merchandise. But then they only talk. This is one of the things that I wanted to point out, because not only the participation of the blacks in the wars of independence of Cuba is not very, it is well documented, but it's hardly taught in schools. The participation in the political movements and in the economic and artistic movements and all the things that
Blacks in the time and then the Afro-Cubans now are part of in building the project that's called La Revolución Cubana, the Cuban Revolution, should be more visible. In the last war of independence was from 1895 through 98, when there was this the Spanish-American War. But it was a struggle, it was a war waged by Black and white people. Black people died as much as white people. It is said that 86,000 Black people died fighting for the independence of Cuba, and 36 white people died. In 1898, after the Spanish-American War, so there's this annexation. Spanish loses Cuba to the United States, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Then what the United States does is a translation of their cultural worldview, the racist worldview, that not only are the Black people and poor people in Cuba dealing with the colonial past, Spanish imperialism, but now we have a new imperial force on the island, which is the United States. And they translate literally, they implement, they materialize Jim Crow after that. So we have segregation in the parks of Cuba. We have people that are only serving the interests of the United States as the governors of Cuba, as presidents of Cuba, up until the Cuban Revolution. I'm giving just an overarching idea of where I'm coming from. So this was slavery. This was a system, an economic system that was built on the shoulders of people that were enslaved. Then we have the wars of independence. Then we have the intervention of the United States when the Maine was exploding in the Bay of Havana. And from that, but we have a series of experiences that are violent against the people that are put in place to govern the island by the United States. The United States was owned between 75 through or the 85% of cultivating Cuban land. And they were owners of sugar places for, we call it ingenios, azucareros. That's a place where they cut the sugar and they process it into sugar and all the byproducts. So when the Cuban Revolution comes in 59, we have had also in 1906 or 1908, the formation of a first Black political movement, or party, I should say, el Partido Independiente de Color, the independent party for people of color. And their agenda was not only to better the life and conditions and for citizenship, not only for Black people, but for the rest of the Cuban society, people who were not considered citizens, people who needed to go back to go to school. They fought for all those, basic human rights. They were considered racist. And in 1912, it was one of the largest massacres implemented on the island in the eastern part of Cuba, which completely tampered with any possibility of political participation, political movement, and that's called La Guerra Chiquita, the small war, or the little war, or the race war. That's a war waged against this political party, Partido Independiente de Color, because they saw danger in that. They saw that how come these Black people are going to organize? How come are they making demands? How come do they know what's good for them and for the rest of the Cuban society that's been disenfranchised, that are not considered citizens? But that was, I guess, one of the culminating moments in history of Cuba where Blacks were at last able or capable to politically constitute themselves into a revolutionary party. I should say revolutionary because it was new, it was something different. It was a coalition of thinkers, of people who thought of people who wrote. They were journalists, they were writers and poets and with a political mindset. So that was in 1912. I am doing a second PhD on race in Cuba, and I found out about Fernando Ortiz. Fernando Ortiz is one of the, biggest voices, academic voices, an intellectual and an anthropologist and ethnographer. And I found out that he was instrumental in 1906 through 1912 in writing Los Negros Esclavos de Cuba, the black slaves of Cuba, and how their lack of civility and their religious practices were part of what they called in Havana, la mala vida, the bad life. So that helped the police through images, through photographs, to identify anyone who was a practitioner of Santeria or of Ñañiguismo or whatever African cultural practice. So through Fernando Ortiz, he had this huge amount of information. Not only does he know all about the rituals, but also how he identified these people as being savages, how they had to die, and how it is impossible, that is inadmissible if they wanted to keep peace in Havana and in Cuba and quietness. And that was called, and then they started, and that got the support of the government, who just through the beginning of the 20th century, through the 1920s, to whiten the island. Cuba was too black. Cuba was too African. Cuba was too savage, because we have the presence of this black African history and cultural practices for the savages. So I say that, bring that up, because recently, last year, Fernando Ortiz's work was declared national heritage. But then with the triumph of the revolution, many of these ideologies that get corrected, along the time, were not censored. They were not checked. They were not called upon. They just simply transitioned into a new system, and nothing was said about this heritage, this inheritance of colonial legacy, of Jim Crow, of people being on their own corners, of how this Afro-Cuban or Black movement was never successful because they didn't know how to organize. So Fidel Castro comes to power. Then he declares that after 2 years after, he said, well, everyone's been given equal opportunity, which was true. And from my point of view, it's a humanistic project, the one that Fidel initiated. But then the legacy of the past was silenced. When he said, if people are given equal opportunity, then that's the end of racism, that's the end of racial mindset, that's the end of everything that is not permissible under or conceivable in a revolution. So years go by, and we still have, in Cuba, everyone has equal opportunity. But then it's harder for us Blacks or Afro-descendants to really get use of all that opportunity. How do I get that? When I was going to school, for instance, my mom had to struggle a lot to just find shoes and clothes for us to send us to school. And yes, we went to college for free, and we were provided universal health care. And I say every day, Viva Fidel, yes. But then there were things that needed to be done and still need to be done. There needs to be reparation for healing. It's a society that is in need of a real, painful healing dialogue. We need to teach this to the kids in school. We need to break the stereotypes on television where Blacks are only slaves, or we're being yelled at if we don't play a part of a slave, but we work as a secretary. We need to break, this issue of tourism, where all the visuals are of Black women, you know, super big, large women with tobacco, with a cigar in her hand, in her mouth, men just dancing for the Yorubas. I think we still need to work on how to give a different, you know, more platform so that people really show and feel full citizenship. I would love to see this happening in my country. And I'm saying this because I am a revolutionary. And revolutions are never done. It doesn't happen once. Revolutions are a gerund, you know. They are being built, constructed. And as we move forward, I am proud of Cuba because it's shown through this pandemic that it's one of the countries that's been able to cope with that, you know, pandemic. Because people are being instructed, people are being given the opportunity to practice what Fidel taught us. He would always say, well, it's better to prevent than to cure. Because after almost 60 years of the criminal U.S. Blockade, my country, our country, is facing one of the largest economic, you know, breakdowns and issues. In 1989, I graduated, and then I became an interpreter. That was the same year when the communist bloc collapsed. And that year, everything changed to most people. But then for many of my friends and my family, my relatives, things were harder, but things were always hard for us. So once we lost all that support from the communist bloc, then the realities, you know, emerged. It came to surface, just like here in the United States with the COVID, you know, all these inequalities, all this need of reparation, psychological reparation, economic, cultural, political reparation, you know, it's just for healing. That started in 1989 with the collapse of the communist bloc. I was given the task to teach people who used to be teachers of Slavic languages. Imagine, I was 23 and 54, so at 23 I started working. So I've been teaching for over 30 years already. And these people, some of them committed suicide because in their 50s and 60s, and people almost retiring, they had to be recycled, retrained. But there was no food, no transportation. I didn't even have an alarm clock, but I had to be there at work, at the university, to teach. Cuba opened up to tourism as a way to counter this deficit. But then with tourism came another way of being Black and being Cuban and being white. I remember going to the hotels that were being built, and just by going into that place, being looked at, you know, from top to bottom, and being asked, what do you want? And I would bring a newspaper with the ad from the same day. They're looking for a secretary that would speak, you know, languages and this and that could take care of the phone calls. And they say, well, I think I'm qualified here. Here's my degree, here are my grades, and here's a letter. And it'd be nice if, you know, hello? Hello?
Yes, hello.
Yes.
We're hearing you fine,
Hello?
Gloria.
It's good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And then I
good.
said it'd be nice if I could, you know, get an interview. And they said, no, we already filled the position. That happened, I don't know how many times. I remember going to these industrial fairs, large fairs, international. And this one in particular was, I get ready, I started learning this vocabulary, all the language that revolved around the production of oil with seeds. It was seed oil. So I studied, and it was great. The day came, And here I am standing waiting for the person in charge, because this is a Canadian. They thought that, well, I was going to be a good job as an interpreter. The man never showed up. But then unbeknownst to me, the man has been, you know, walking back and forth in front of me, never introduced himself to me. Then I go up to the organizers and say, hey, I've been here for an hour, and I would like to meet the person that's coming to the fair. And I was told his name was blah, blah, blah. He's coming from Canada. And then this is a lady. This is a Black lady. She's one of the organizers. And she said, well, I'm so sorry to tell you this. So what's going on? Is he not coming? And then she says, no, actually he's here, and he saw you. I said, what do you mean? I haven't met him. Well, he said that he'd like someone that's, you know, lighter in skin, longer hair, and but he doesn't want to work with you. I said, what are you saying? And then she said, well, but then you have an opportunity to work at this, you know, souvenir shop. At the door, they give you, nice tips, and they can give you presents. That felt like a slap on my face. And it proved to me the cowardice of the system that is willing to just give in to whatever exigencies of white male demands in a country that is trying to build a new metaphor, you know, of human relationship, of human conviviality, and of healing. I went home. I spent the next 12 days at home grieving, trying to understand, trying to make sense of what happened to me. Then went back to work, and I brought up the issue to the Young Communities League, of which I was part. And then they just laughed. They laughed so hard that it made me cry. But then you can multiply this experience by the hundreds, if not thousands. I don't want to exaggerate, but this is part of what I've been trying to understand. How come we don't talk about this? How come there's no one, we don't talk about this now? Yes, we talk about this, but it's a small group of people. After so many years, the experience, you know, they had the experience, then they're willing to open up because they've outgrown their pain. And it's happened to me. We don't even talk about this in our family. When we talk about, you know, what's going on, and we never talked about these racial issues and experience. And sometimes we laughed, just laughed. My mom says, if I had been born, you know, an enslaved woman, I would have been a Maroon, you know. If I had born an enslaved woman, I would have been a Maroon woman. I would have escaped. I would have gone to the mountains. I wouldn't stand up for that. But actually, they did. Enslaved people did everything they could. Talking to a friend, she, as part of the tourist industry, she was, you know, one of these people that get in front of the tourists and made them do this and that. And she told me, well, you know what? One day I had to lip sync like Whitney Houston, and then this guy, you know, with the bodyguard, the movie The Bodyguard. So this man, that's white, and then my friend. All of a sudden, she has to jump into this swimming pool, and she's all wet, and the guy jumps after her, and he saves her. This is an act, let me put it, for tourists. And as she's walking out, carroñero. Are you listening? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So carroñero is someone that eats dead meat. Is a vulture. Not that he's a vulture, is that he's performing, he's doing this number with a Black woman. And she couldn't believe what she heard. carroñero. Everyone looked at that lady, and then they kept on, you know, looking at the show, and the show ended. And my friend is telling me with tears in her eyes. She told me this last December. I was in Spain for 3 months, and then I came back. I went through from August through January, and this is me doing interviews. And this is a 53-year-old woman crying because that hurts so much. And this is in Cuba. The legacy of silence about these topics needs to continue being broken. This Roberto Zurbano has been talking about that. Tomasito, who wrote The Black Man in Cuba, is talking about that. Gisela is talking about that. My uncle, you know, Georgina Herrera, Daisy Rubiera, all the women, all the men. But it's kind of like a voice that is getting nowhere. I guess we need more alliances to just appreciate all the work that the revolution has done as a humanistic experiment and socialist stronghold in the area, while also healing all these scars of the past. There's so many stories that people are not telling because they're not afraid, they are ashamed. Mm-hmm. And if they're ashamed, they keep their silence and their pain so close to their heart that it's hard for people to really develop their full potential and to see that whenever there's a representation of race, Black is ugly in Cuba. Black has a problem. There's a saying in Cuba that not only white people say, but also Black men and mixed race men do, say too. I wear sunglasses every day. This is what, you know, one of the things. I wear sunglasses every day, so when I look at a white woman, I see her mulata. I see her mixed race. When I look at a mulata, mixed race woman, I see her Black. So that when I look at a Black woman, I don't see her. I don't even want to see her. You see? I was growing up in the 80s. I think it was the beginning of the 80s, and the movie King Kong showed. And that was Hollywood strolling in the streets of Havana through King Kong. Those were tough years, they still are. We are called King Konas for women, King Kong for men. You have to be Black, very Black, spread nose like mine. And then that feature of representation, that representation makes you wild, savage, makes you in need of taming, but also you inspire fear. That's the fear of the Black person that started after the revolution of Haiti and entered in Cuba, and that was reinforced through Jim Crow and continued through the 50s. And then with Fidel, all the good intentions, these things continued. But we were all given the opportunity to be more humane, I guess, more be part of a project that needed all of us. And it's a project that is being constructed still while we go on the street at the Plaza de la Revolución to yell, you know, Yankees, go home. Mm-hmm. We are just one fist. We are tight. We are together. That's the Cuban people. But after that, the healing process still needs some attention. When economic crisis surface, you see that this conversation is still in need of being done, you know, of moving forward, of giving people more platforms to really tell and share their experiences and teach. It's a pedagogical, you know, process. And I'm not saying that racism is blatant. No, but it's hurtful, it's painful, it's harmful, and yet it's so hard to say this is where it happens and people are racist. because we have this cultural practice that embraces African and European practices and indigenous practice, because we acknowledge that we are one when it comes to the imperialistic and criminal laws of the United States against my country and against the rest of the world. But yet, we have to work on this aspect of how to become full-fledged member of a Cuban society. I'll stop talking because I would like to enter into a dialogue with everybody, just answer questions. I guess arts could be one of the spaces where we can all intersect through dance, through painting, through literature, through teaching all these values that are not being developed in full potential. Schools need to go over their curriculum and teach the students the importance of the presence and participation and why Black and enslaved people are there, what they did, their contribution. And today, why is it that we only see Fidel and Camilo entering Havana triumphant when there were so many Black people with him? So all these images and representation of how Cuban is being constructed as this myth, from my point of view, needs to be revised. My brother, Orlando, he's the older one, he said, you know what, Gloria, Cubans, the Afro-Cubans, the Black Cubans, they need to continue taking advantage of this opportunity, and they need to continue educating themselves, moving forward, you know, just making sure they do the right thing. And yes, he's right. But I think it's a task in which, where we cannot do it alone. This is a coalitional movement. This is a cry for looking beyond race and do quantitative and qualitative, you know, leaps of understanding of history, and trying to understand the nuances and let people know when what they say hurts, and call out these experiences. Yep. Hello?
Hi. Yes, we heard you very well, Gloria. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
Oh my God.
maybe we can start with questions.
That would be great. That would be wonderful.
So, someone messaged me privately with a question. Well, first of all, I want to say, Gloria, thank you so much for giving us the gift of your stories tonight. And we can't gather together, but we were all together listening from all over the world. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yes.
So, yeah, someone asked me to ask you, what were Maroon communities?
What are Maroon communities? These are enslaved people who fled in the houses of their masters. They just escaped and they took to the mountains, and they formed their own communities. They were chased down. They were followed by dogs. Many of them made it, you know, to the mountains, and they were free. Those are Maroons, cimarrones, as we call it in Spanish. Mm-hmm. Yes? Hello?
Yes, we heard you. Yeah, thank you, Gloria. Gloria, maybe I will mention that the Maroons in Jamaica,
yes,
actually then collaborated with the British to put down a rebellion by slaves in 1760.
Yes, and the Maroons in Colombia, and of course in Haiti, the Maroons. So, you know, I think there were Maroons all over where there were enslaved people. No one wants to be enslaved, and people do what they can. Yes, and they form alliances, and I think that's what's about. This is a project of life, of humanness or humanity, or you know.
Yes,
But
yes.
that requires people, souls, hearts, no matter the color. It's just the conviction that I am a human being. Please acknowledge that. That's it. Yes. Hello?
Okay, so who's gonna read questions or call people? Elise or Yoav, do you want to do that task?
Elise, can you do it?
I am not the best with Zoom, and I don't want to belabor it, but
Okay.
if possible, maybe people could just call out and, you know, just go one by one.
So I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Gloria, in terms of I recognize much of what you're saying, and I really appreciate your talk and learned a lot. In terms of the question of possible changes of attitude, including among white Cubans, in relation to Fernando Ortiz, I have the impression that he changed his attitude later. Is that true?
It is true, but remember, he changed his attitude because the Americans considered every Cuban, you know, not purely white. And he heard that, he knew that, and that's why he changed his position. But nonetheless, he remained one of these icons of the Cuban culture. And one of the interests that I have is, well, I would like to read about who's reading about me, who's writing about me, who's looking at me, who's studying me. I want to reverse, you know, the look, because we've been looked at, we've been studied, we've been passive voices. And this decolonizing effort of mine and of so many people, it's been such an uphill battle that when you have these fossilized icons of knowledge and knowledge production, it is hard to deconstruct it. And then you have to do, as Idelbert and as Walter Benjamin said, you have to do allegory. You have to go deep down to those, you know, dusty documents, forgotten. You have to go inside and get muddy and dirty and find the root of where it comes from. That's what I did, and I found that, and I was so disappointed. He was working with these Italian detectives, because at the time photography had been invented in the mid 19th century, and in Italy they were using photos to build a documentation of every person who committed, you know, who was doing illegal things, delinquent. And then Fernando Ortiz found this, you know, very interesting, how to construct to build a catalog of blackness to keep reinforcing this idea of the fear of the black. So he would publish these photographs of people against a background that is kind of yellowish, and then their faces were so in your face that you really felt like, oh no, my God, this person has to be taken off the street. I remember growing up in Havana and hearing and listening to people say, where is so-and-so? Where is so-and-so? I know, in Spanish, in Cuba, we say, lo guardaron, no? He was put away. Meaning by the time of the carnivals in July, mostly black men that had committed felony were taken off the street and put into jail. My father was one of them. He spent a year. He was put away. Okay, lo guardaron, because of that fear because of the just in case. And he spent a year. He said, well, no, we confused. We thought it was so-and-so, but we apologized. And then they paid him retroactively, you know, his salary. He was a painter. He would paint facades in buildings. I grew up hearing that. No one has done a study as to the population, you know, the incarceration population in Cuba, but more and more people are speaking out. And this is one of the legacies. It's that fear. It's that lack of opportunity to give to yourself. You see, to try to meet the other. And as long as we recreate and reinvent and mythologize and create otherness, there's such a distance. It opens such a chasm, you know, for a dialogue to happen. And this wasn't checked out. This wasn't rectified. This was not talked about. Things just happened, you know. These black men, they're savages, you know. They say that in Spanish. They say tener una merienda de negros, to have a snack, you know, where it's just snack like black. It's because people laugh and people say jokes and people are loud. In Spanish, they say to work like a nigger. It's when you spend hours and hours and hours trying to finish a project. Then you say, oh, you work like a nigger. And then you hear these are jokes, but it's based on this legacy. I mean, this fact, and the fact that, yes, Fernando Ortiz is an icon, and yes, he committed himself of creating this, you know, wealth of knowledge, but it's an extractivism, I would say. It's a cultural extractivism. There are people that are qualified to do what he did, but he lived all his life. Not only, I'm going to make a parenthesis. He, after supporting the death penalty for some of the people that he helped incarcerate, he would appropriate their cultural representations, their dolls and the hairs and the pieces of cloth that these people had from their ancestors, and he would create afterwards that huge house that's a Ortiz Foundation that's based on, first of all, that appropriation, because him and Israel Cabrera, who was another one Cuban that they devoted himself even more furiously to the study of blacks in Cuba. They felt it's good to keep this as an evidence. We need this to keep studying, you know, and we need to learn their songs. We need to know how to weave. We need to know how to put together, how to bead these necklaces. That's what happened. And it pains me. And it's a reality. It's out there, and it passed from generation to generation. It's family talk, and that's where we start socializing race. We socialize race, you know, in our family realms, and then with friends, and that's how it goes down the street, to the point where I've been yelled things in Havana, my friends, and I've been denied access. And this is something that needs to be brought to light, needs to be spoken about, and women, black women, have been bearing the brunt, mostly, of all this kind of discrimination and sexism, and yes.
Thanks.
I'm on a phone. I'm not on the computer, so I can't raise my hand. But again, thank you, Dr. Caballero. You've been fascinating to listen to. But I wanted to just touch on the topic you started with, which is reparations. And for anyone who was here watching the early Democratic debates, we had a candidate who actually spoke about the need for reparations with descendants of slaves. And, you know, I think one of the questions that I think we need to look at is, what can we do to support, you know, not just Cuba, but also the stopping the myth, you know, that hailed from the slave patrol and the Europeans that came over, and all of this you use the term beautifully, mythology. I don't think that we collectively understand how much America has tainted the view of descendants of slaves throughout the world. I have so many Black and brown friends. I am white. My partner is a Black man from Haiti. Been together for 12 years. A very good friend of mine, her father was in the diplomatic service from Somalia. She's extremely well off. They live in an area of doctors and professionals in the DC area. They're Haitian neighbors who have the biggest house on the block. My girlfriend called me and she said, you know, they just have these very bad comments on these people from this place, that, you know, descendants of slaves, whatever, but they were talking about somebody else from Haiti. And she said, do you know what the Santa Maria thing? And when you commented, the way you wove that in, that they were not allowed, when I did a little research, you know, it's like you turn something that, imagine that in 2020, a Haitian doctor is condemning other Black people from the Caribbean.
Yes.
And you know, my girlfriend is from Somalia, but she was raised in Italy, so she doesn't know that part of her own culture.
Yes.
This is why, if we go back to, you know, it's unfortunate that somebody like Marianne Williamson was squashed so early, you know, the way they manipulated the conversations in the debate, because we do need to be educated, and we need to be demanding that progressive peace candidates include, I believe, I only learned recently that $20,000 was given in reparation to every Japanese family that was interned post-World War II.
Yes, yes.
What do we owe the descendants of slaves? And I will tell you that Africans that didn't experience slavery, even Haitians who come here and they don't understand what it is to grow up in a minority here. And so I think you were 100% onto something, that until we start to have political leadership that elevates the conversation, and let's stop focusing on, you know, the only conversation we can have, and I have, you know, I'm part Jewish, so, but it's always Israel we can talk about.
Yes.
We never talk about any other group of people. Why can't we talk about reparations? Bernie Sanders was not willing to do that. Nothing will come right until we understand that this nation was built on slavery. It was the whole hemisphere. And there need to be reparations for that reason, because the entire infrastructure was made to support that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We need to move on.
I didn't hear what you're saying.
We need to move on. Please try to finish the question.
So my question is your thoughts on the importance of the American role in leading the conversation about reparations.
I think the conversation has to be multi-vocal. It's not only, from my point of view, right? It's not only the United States leading the conversation. I guess the conversation has to be an intercepted realm of voices where slavery took place.
Who do you think are most important? I mean, what would you hope for?
I would hope for, yes, more, well, people have to be educated as to what their country, you know, their wealth come from, where this country was built on first homicide of the native peoples, and then enslavement. And then people have to understand that Blacks and Native Americans and everybody, they need wealth. We inherit nothing. And I hear and I learned about the Black Wall Street. All that was burned down to ashes. whenever there's a possibility of a rebirth, like the phoenix, the Black community is raised to nothing. It's just that constant unacknowledgement of self-sufficiency, of maturity, of creativity that people have to understand that we all have as human beings. Once we understand that, we need to make sure that not only do we have cultural power, it's not only hip hop, okay? I would like to see a new way of looking at human beings, what is called into, you know, some of my writings, dermal beings, up until we understand that we make mistakes, that we are not pure, that we all are in a process of becoming. And as a result, I need to check myself out. I need to look at these conversations needs to be taking place, and that will take you to a very, you know, different uncomfortable spaces. But until we are willing to start talking as a multi-centered conversation where you have all walks of life people, where there's a sincere willingness to learn and to heal, because that's a healing process. And it's going to be ugly, but no one, you know, not many people are willing to go to these kinds of therapies, you know, group conversations, because it's easy to just say, okay, these are Blacks, and then you don't have to deal with that. We have to start learning how to deal with what you know, the monster that I construct. How do I start dealing with that, with myself? So it's not, and the United States, it imports, you know, racism. It imports a way of looking at the world that is divided, that is misogynist, that is all that, and people have to, first of all, we need literacy, actually. We need a literacy campaign in the United States. People need to be educated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could go on and on, but this is what I have in mind. It's a short answer, but thank you for the question, and something that I will have to keep pondering and reading about, and see how I come up with a better answer. But no, thank you. Yes.
No, it's a great answer. Thank you.
Hello, if I may, and I sort of hesitate to ask a question at this forum. I'm actually a Cuba specialist and a historian from Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada. And as a Cuba specialist and a Cuba solidarity activist, somebody sent me this link. But I think it's important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I do a lot of writing on Cuba and on race in Cuba. And on the reparations question, I think it's important to bear in mind that the Caribbean community, the CARICOM, which are 15 English-speaking countries in the Caribbean, launched a lawsuit against England, France, Britain, and Holland for reparations. Okay, and Cuba has supported this, and it's a very important case that's going forward. I think people should be aware of it. People should also be aware that next year will be the 20th anniversary of the Durban Conference, the United Nations World Conference Against Racism, Xenophobia, and other related intolerance, that took place in late August and early September, and was a major defeat for the West, because reparations was one of the major issues that raised its heads, but because 9/11 happened, all of that got erased. Okay.
Yeah.
But I have a question for you, Gloria. During your presentation, and I think one of the things that Cuba demonstrates is obviously, the limits of what can be accomplished in an island, and the dimensions of racism, let's call it white supremacy, that exists, right? Solved in one particular country. So I'm wondering if you comment on the fact that generally on the left, there tends to be a class reductionist attitude, right? That even in Cuba at some point, they began to recognize that you had to intervene in issues of racism directly. And I'm thinking about beginning on a very limited case in the 1986 Third Congress of the Communist Party, where the affirmative action program was initiated. And they talked about it. Fidel, for the first time, spoke openly about race, that this problem has not been solved, right? Okay. And I wonder if you can talk about some of the initiatives that Cuba has attempted to do. They're not complete enough in solving this, but they should solve this. And then the last point I'd like to make, and I'm making an argument in a paper I'm writing, that in the 19th century, Jose Marti at the moment said, we are not Black, we are not white, we are Cuban, which was necessary to try and unite the Cuban nation in its war of independence. I argue that in the 21st century, the slogan should be, we are Black, and we are white, and we are Cuban. of acknowledgement, okay, that there is.
I agree with you. Yes, yes, yes.
And I would ask you, I'm writing a book on Cuba's role in Africa, and I'd ask you, you mentioned the medical brigades, but it's the tremendous contribution that Cuba made in Southern Africa. I spent a lot of time in Cuban archives and in Southern Africa, did some work at Paraglahis, focusing on Cuba's incredible work in the African liberation struggles. But I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you so much. And yes, I've always been proud of being Cuban because of all the, this is the internationalism that we learned from the teachings of Fidel Castro. Yes, we're poor, but we share our expertise and our willingness to just mobilize from grassroots, etc. In 1986, there was a rectification period. And prior to that, what was happening? Well, again, we go back to practices of religion. In the 80s, we had the Marielitos, right? Most of those people who left Cuba, many of them, they left because of their religious belief. They would practice Palo Montes, they would practice Santeria, Ñañiguismo, you name it. But then that was against the system. So it wasn't a matter of, no, you are a believer, and then no, the practice was carried out underground. It was always alive underground. You couldn't wear your beads, your necklaces showing that you are a son of Oshun or Yemaya. You couldn't wear a bracelet. Everything had to be, hidden. I remember at home, my mom having these meetings with men and women so that we could do our prayers and look at me, sing our songs, and perhaps, enter into trance. We had to turn the radio so loud, and 2 or 3 would bring even their radios to our house and turn it very, very loud so they wouldn't, the neighbors would not hear, our prayers and our songs. If you were a member of the Communist Party, you were not supposed to practice Santeria. You were not supposed to be a religious devotee of any sort. They could go into your house, and if they found, altars, they could smash it. So in 86, there came the rectification period. But remember, Marielito already happened. And one of the rectification things what they wanted to rectify is the freedom of religious practice, which was done. I was so amazed and surprised at how many people of war, skin tones, whatever, they were Cuban, that they had embraced this Afro-Cuban cultural practice, and how proud they were wearing with their, with the uniform. They would put it inside their pocket, inside their the neck of their shirt. They would wear their bracelets. People would sing out loud, in front of their houses. They would play their drums, and then you will learn when there was going to be a toque, okay? When they were going to play the drums for a deity. That was a major step forward. Why? Because people thought, people understood, people internalized that, yes, this is who we are. Why were we denied the right to be? It's just to be. How come, how would this be harmful? And the socialist idea, the communist idea based on the ex-Soviet, is that you don't mix. There is no religion. No religion. This is a like society. No religion. Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So this is one of the major things that was accomplished. Remember in '86, I was at the university. I was in college. I graduated 3 years later. But then there were rumors of things going on in the Soviet Union. We were so close. We learned Russian. People were sent to all those, to the Soviet Union, to Germany, and there was even a program on TV that was called 9,500, and it referred to the 9,500 kilometers that are from Havana to Moscow. So that was really part of who we were, that was a part of our DNA. And so what happened was that we were living this myth of what the Soviet Union was. And the promise was that we were all equal. And the promise was that we had, we were together in the same boat. I guess what was missing was the racial integration, that topic. They talked about the cultural practice, but access to rights to, for instance, when Cuba in the 1920s, in the 1900s through the 1920s, set the task of whitening the island. They opened immigration to white people from Europe, especially from northern Spain, meaning Galicia and Asturias. They, in Havana, they still have their clubs, They have the Asociación Asturiana, the Asturian Club. They have the Galician Club, Asociación Gallega. They even have the Arab house, the house for people who are descendants of Arabs, people who spoke Arab. But then they recently created the Yoruba Association. You have to enlist, and then there's a quota you have to pay. But this was recent. You see, the clubs that existed before the revolution for Black people to get together, to talk, there were even cabildos, or the clubs where people went to, for healing, for talking, for political organizing, for social movement. All those clubs and cabildos were little by little taking away. They were disappearing in Cuba. And recently, people are still from cabildos saying we can't be part of the cabildos, where people just get together and they practice their religion. They take care of their their community. Someone is sick, they send money, or they pay visit. They would buy flowers if there's a disease. All that, well, people are not able to continue because they need support from the government, and people have been only using funds from the same members. And the situation in Cuba it's hard, it's tough, it's difficult. So that's how those groupings and clubs and associations have been dying out. I think this is one of the things that needs repair, that needs to be talked about. How Black people have the right also, the same as the Asturian descendants, or the same as the Galician descendants, for their clubs, for their houses of prayers, of reparation. Not only the Yoruba Association that's become sort of like a museum. You go there and everybody, it's open to the public, and there's a cafe, and you have to pay in Cuban currency, chavitos and all that. But before, there was nothing, and things were dying out. So I guess that's important. That's something to be talked about, to be looked at, and to be reinstalled, so that we give, due to her honor to honor the people who are also part of the Cuban Revolution, of the Cuban population, of the ethnicity, of the culture, manifestation or representation of what Cuba is. It's not only Galician or Asturian, which is great, but it's also that Black component of our society that needs reparation, as well as the necessity to be part of a larger conversation of where do scholarships come from. I remember not being aware or not being informed and not knowing, and not only me, my friends, how come people travel? Where do they go? Why do they go? How did they know? Knowing is part of that powerful, knowledge is a powerful institution that once you have it, you have power, because information is power. So many people, if you were not connected, if you didn't know, if you didn't have any relatives, then you didn't know that, for instance, embassies would give you scholarships to study foreign language, or that you could be part of lottery, perhaps, and then get a scholarship to study abroad. But some people did, and their children went abroad, and the children study abroad. That kind of information for which the Partido, the Revolutionary Party of Color was, fighting for, scholarships for everybody, or access to the information, that needs to be talked about. No, information most of the time doesn't trickle down, doesn't have that trickle down effect. It doesn't percolate. It stops at a certain time, and it's hard for the rest to find out because we lack that link. Not many people have the connections, have the information. It's not published in newspapers. Someone say, well, why do you wait to be told? Why don't you go out there and find out? Yes, but where do we go? And if I go, are people willing to share like I've done? We've been going places and say, oh no, that was given. Oh no, didn't you know? And didn't you know what gave us very little information? That's something important for every Cuban. But most of the time you see that people who go abroad and scholarships, it's people who have connections. And again, this is part of an inheritance that we still have to talk about, and we're still struggling with. Yep.
Wow,
Hello?
you. Yes, thank you.
And let me add a little bit more. I think also preparation in housing. In 1982, in the 80s, Reagan was in power. And he at some point declared, well, he said that he would invade Cuba. At that time, the revolution was building, housing for families and the house for the doctor and the nurse. So much was being put on, energy, and people after their 5 to 8 hours of work would constitute brigades, and they would work and build their house, and then they move on, and it was wonderful. But then Reagan said, well, we're going to invade Cuba with Division 82nd. And he never invaded, but every resource was deviated into building things to, bunkers, and just to make sure that we develop the war of the people, la guerra del pueblo, and just to prepare everybody into knowing how to throw a hand grenade, how to shoot a machine gun. All that ended. That part of the project for housing. We still are overrepresented in unsanitary housing, and there's white people, but then Black people are overrepresented. That needs to be continued. That conversation, that project, as long as. But again, everything stops the moment we have a crisis, and the moment it never gets fully, accomplished because of the blockade, and more it's more difficult. The conversation about these reparations, or I want to do this for the entire population, and how to heal. We are healing as a people because of the embargo, the economic embargo, as one unit, as a fist, because we as a people have the need of this, imperialist, powerful country on our necks. That's the George Floyd right there. It's not that inside Cuba we have it. We are Floyd. It's an entire island we've been Floyd, and I'll use it as a verb, since JFK declared the economic embargo on Cuba, and it's been strengthening, and the project is being delegitimized, and it's created a paranoid, inside the island, and we also have our own internal embargo. But everything, it trickles down, it boils down, it percolates down to a project that's been tampered with by the criminal economic embargo since 1962, if I'm not mistaken, October. That's the George Floyd. And that's our need. So reparations, yes, we will self-heal. We are like dogs. We heal our own heals. We lick our own wounds. But all the time we have to put pressure up and find, bursts of oxygen to breathe, because it's hard. And the conversation on race gets harder because first we have to breathe.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, so it is 9 o'clock.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I know the conversation could continue for a very long time, but
Yeah.
thank you, Gloria, and thank you to everyone who showed up tonight.
Gloria, we need to do a second round.
Oh. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank all the organizations. I want to thank everybody who took time of their precious time just to, share some thoughts with me, make me think, make me understand where I am, what I am becoming. And I want to thank my friends, people whom I met in Cuba, Nick, Nancy, Phyllis Owens. I want to thank them because they've seen me growing. Nancy and Dick and Phyllis, I have a granddaughter. Osmar's 34, Di is 24. Dan is doing great, he's 78. Dia, my stepdaughter. Everybody, please, thank you. And accept me being human, a human being with faults and foibles and, and all my defects. But we are always becoming. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you so much. Lots of love to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We love you. Thank you so much. Thank you.